Here.
Alder Rademacher.
Here.
Alder Thomas.
She's
Don't have her.
excused.
Mayor O'Connor.
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the February 6th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Any corrections or additions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Minutes are approved. We have an appearance on the schedule from Superintendent Dan Olson, but I'm not sure if he's planning on being here via Zoom or... So we also have an appearance by Jennifer Kerr. So Jen, do you want to come up and actually you can go over to the lectern over there. She would like to speak in favor of the resolution to remove a racist street name.
Thanks, all. Thank you for the time. It's infinitely harder to be on this side of the dais than it is over there. I've been nervous all afternoon. So on September 8th, 2022, the National Board on Geographic Names voted for removal of the word squaw from 650 place names in the United States. The word squaw has long been used as an offensive ethnic, racial, and sexist slur for Indigenous women. On September 10th, I wrote to ask this body to take action to address the street name in Nona that bears its name. I am grateful to Alder Wood for his response and leadership that has brought Resolution 23-2-2612 before you today. I would also like to thank Mayor O'Connor and Alder Moore for their co-sponsorship of this resolution. This word has a long history of derogatory use and should not be used as a street name in this community. For many Indigenous persons, this word carries the same weight and offense as the N-word, and as such, I will no longer use the term in this statement. Street names are an expression of a community identity and should reflect our values. The use of this word does not reflect the values of Monona where I want to raise my daughters. Aside from the repulsive nature of the word, its use perpetuates misogynistic views of First Nations women as things rather than someone's mother, sister, or daughter. This otherness subjugates Indigenous women who, as a result, are murdered at a rate 10 times higher than the national average. 56% of First Nations women living in the United States have experienced sexual violence, a rate significantly higher than non-Native women. In 2019, this body lent its support to an application to the National Board on Geographic Names to rename the bay at the south end of Nona to Wickawack Bay. That application was approved in 2021. Since the name of this street no longer mirrors the name of the body of water it runs into, there is no reason to keep this name. Approving this resolution is a small step this body can take to create a more inclusive Monona that reflects the values of the community we all want to live in. I strongly urge you to support this resolution. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have we lost the
Oh, they should be up there. No, they're still there. He needs to be put up there. Can you put the Zoom stuff up there too?
It's still going. It's just this one side up. It's the Zoom can still hear you. Oh.
Are you doing it? Apologize, we're having some problems with the Zoom line. So.
The internet just went out and stuff.
The internet just went on here?
Yeah, just give me a second. So once I'm done here, I'll try to.
Okay, do you think, are we okay? Okay, next, under appearances, Monona Grove School District Superintendent Dan Olson, who is going to present information regarding their upcoming school operational referendum. Dan, want to go ahead? I'm sorry we're having some technical difficulties here tonight, so I think we're all set to go.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for giving us some time this evening. And so I have some slides, but I'll make this really short and just want to focus on some of the highlights. So if it's okay, I'll go ahead and share. Well, I'm not going to be sharing my screen. It's not allowing me to. So but all of our materials and are on our website, and there's a number of mailings that will be sent out.
I think,
so we'll make sure.
Dan, I'm sorry to interrupt. I think you can share your screen now if you'd like.
Oh, there we go.
Is that right, Dan?
Perfect.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, great. Oops. All right. Okay, so I'm going to go through these rather quickly. These are enough slides for a little bit longer presentation. Like I said, I'll just try to hit the highlights and be respectful of your time. So just want to answer a couple key questions about the referendum that we think are important for you all to know, as well as our taxpayers who support our school district. There's really three reasons that we're looking at this referendum at this time. Number one, of course, is everyone is aware, increased costs with inflation and other factors. It's really challenging to try to maintain budget numbers, as is. Secondly, we have been utilizing federal funding for these past 2 years to help balance our budgets, and that money is going away at the end of this year. And then the third most important piece is the stagnant state funding over these past 2 years. And so when we look at our overall budget, the most important thing to remember is that 42% of our spendable budget comes from the state. And so when we receive little to no increase, that really has a major impact on our budget. So this past 2 years on the state 2-year budget, we had a 0% increase in per pupil revenue from the state. And so we're really looking at new spendable funding in order to continue our state programming. This graph, I think, really tells the big picture about what is happening with state funding for all school districts in Wisconsin. And it goes back to 2002, where the state was ranked number 11, well above the national average in per pupil spending. And then you'll see a sharp decline that started in 2011, that coincided with Act 10. And then to where we're at now, it has continued really over this last decade, so that now we're well below the state average in per pupil funding. And by 2020, we are ranked 25th. There's some estimates that we currently now have slipped as even down to 30th. So that's really what is causing the budget challenges. Here's another graph that illustrates this lack of state funding. The bottom line shows the actual per pupil increases that all school districts have received since 2008, and the red line shows what it would be if there were inflationary increases over that time. So what that really shows is that the average school district in Wisconsin is behind inflation by about $3,000 per student. And then the expiration of the federal funds. Again, the federal funding was meant to supplement budgets to help us move on from the effects of COVID. But because we were receiving some significant federal funding, our state legislature chose to then not give us the state authority to raise revenue. And that creates a structural deficit then when those monies go away. And again, this is all information that the costs continue to increase. When we look at our budget, you might ask, how can we manage this? And there's some things we can do. Well, as a school district, 70% of our budget is on staffing. That's what we do. We hire teachers and support staff to teach our children. And the things that are fixed costs, like utilities, transportation, purchase services, and so on, is only about 30% of the budget. And then the teachers are really the driving force behind our budget. We know that the most important thing we can do is have an excellent teaching staff for our children. And part of that means being competitive with wages. And so trying to keep up with even cost of living increases for our teachers is a real challenge. And we also are, frankly, competing against other Dane County districts, for teachers. And one thing that, people may or may not realize what our average teacher salary is, but our starting salary for a teacher is $44,550. So we've seen more and more teachers unfortunately, leave the profession and go into the private sector in recent years, and oftentimes it is because of salaries. So really, that's where we're at right now, increasing costs, expiration of one-time federal funds, and no increase in state funding is the real reason that we're going to referendum now. Okay, and so what are we trying to do? This referendum is really just to preserve this and maintain the status quo. It's not for adding new programming or additional staff. It's just to maintain where we're at right now. And then really to reset that revenue per pupil. And again, of course, we've done all we can, we believe, or as far as trying to reduce costs. And the other thing is we are seeing an increase in enrollment. And that does help us with the funding formula in the future, but the funding formula is really based upon a 3-year average of your student count. And so when you see an increase, it takes a couple of years before that really has an impact on your revenue. Okay, and then looking at, this whole phase in of the referendum. You're probably aware, right, that we're in the middle of a current $3.7 million operational referendum. So this graph shows what those incremental increases would look like over the last 3 years, or excuse me, the next 3 years. So having been frozen these last 2 years, this first year of asking for $6 million really makes up for not having any new revenue these last 2 years. And then after that, we're just looking essentially at cost of living increases. An additional 1.6 million the second year, and an additional 2.5 the third. So when you see that the overall amount of 13.8, that is the actual amount over our state imposed revenue limit. But really, the increase per year, I think, is illustrated, by this graph. And then these are the actual impact on the average, fair market value per, $1,000 for the individual, taxpayer. All right, and then just to wrap up, looking at the big picture, those are really big numbers, and look at, why, how does this really impact? And we know the mill rate's only one way of looking at the tax levy, but the reality is revenue limits were put in place back in 1993 when property taxes really were the major source of revenue for school districts. The state increased money for the schools, but then also put in place the revenue limits. So when we see a gradual steady decline of the mill rate over that next 10 years, then pretty steady. And for us locally, 2016 was our first operational referendum. So we saw a slight increase, as you'd expect, in the mill rate, then a steady decrease till the next referendum. And these last 3 years, a pretty significant decrease in the tax levy. So this proposed referendum, I think, is important to point out that really only gets us back to basically the same levels that we were at 4 or 5 years ago. And so that's really the impact overall on this referendum. Okay, and I think I've pretty much covered this. Last thing, what happens if we don't pass the referendum? Well, we're having about a $6 million deficit then that we would have to make up for, which means significant budget reductions. And so we immediately engage our stakeholders, teachers, parents, and start looking at where do we need to scale back if that were to happen. And then lastly, why didn't the previous referendum solve our funding problem? Again, the previous referendums were really short term, for those fixed period of times to help make up for that, the state revenue not keeping up with inflation over those times. It really wasn't to provide, again, new programming or funding, is really just to maintain. All right, and then lastly, I'll leave you with all this information is on our website. We've got several community meetings, various groups like we are this evening. We really want to encourage people to be informed, when they vote, and then our contact information as well that anyone can reach out to. So I really appreciate the time. I know that was a really quick presentation, but glad to have follow-up conversations with anyone, to go into any of this more detail, or if you have, an opportunity right now, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions? I don't think so, but you have a lot of information on your website, correct, Dan?
So all this, information is on there, FAQs, graphs, and so, as you look at it, feel free to contact us if there's follow-up.
Okay, we appreciate your coming tonight to fill us in on what's going on.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on, there's no public
I
hearing.
did get a quick email from Mark Ott. I don't know if you wanted to speak or if
does it say?
It says appear before the city council, but that was because we had Zoom.
Okay,
You just synced it.
I guess we have one more appearance. Mark Ott, would you like to speak?
I'm just here, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm just here to represent Walter Wayne on 501.
Oh,
or
okay.
105, so I'm just here to answer questions should something come up. I'm the architect for the project.
Okay, thank you. We'll be moving on to that item in just a little bit, okay? Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks.
There's no public hearing, there's no consent agenda. I'm going to move a couple things around because we've got a couple things that won't take very long, and then we'll get into so those both are new business. Item 2A, assuming no one has a problem with that. Item 2A, which is started for immediate approval, consideration of applications for 2022, 2023 Class B liquor and Class B fermented malt beverage licenses for Fratelli's Trattoria LLC, doing business as Fratelli's Trattoria, 5801 Monona Drive, Monona, Wisconsin, 53716, put forth by the License Review Committee. And is there a motion to take this out of order?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
Doug, were you going to address this?
Sure, and also I would note that the owner, Joaquin Lopez Santiago, is here as well if you have questions. This is the site of the Angelo's restaurant on Monona Drive. So it's, as Gary Fraboni, the owner, came to the license review and explained, I think for 60 years or however long it's been there, it's been open as a restaurant with a bar and with a liquor license. So, Joaquin, did you want to say anything about what your operations, or? Yes. Could you go up to the microphone?
Hi everyone. My name is Joaquin Lopez, and I'm planning to open where the Angelo's used to be a couple of years ago or a year ago. I'm going to open that place as an Italian restaurant again. The name is going to be Fratelli's Trattoria. It's going to be a casual restaurant. We're going to be selling pizza, pasta, seafood, steak, fish, and we would like to love to have some drinks with that. That's the reason why I'm applying for the liquor license. I don't know if you guys have any other question for me?
Questions, anyone?
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Doug?
What is this?
Nancy?
Where does this put us in terms of numbers, in terms of liquor licenses used and available?
I think we are currently, before voting on this, we're either 5 or 6 below our quota.
Okay,
So
okay,
that's, yeah.
okay, okay.
Anything else? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. It'd be nice to see something in there. It's been empty for a while. Moving on to,
So
I'm sorry, Doug.
I believe the clerk will send out the license.
Oh.
I'm not sure, well, probably won't be tomorrow with the election, but
Soon.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you. Moving on to 2B, consideration of Resolution 23-2-2612, a resolution to remove a racist street name put forth by myself, Alders Wood, and Moore. Doug, would you like to talk about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think former Alder Kerr covered it pretty well. It's the only thing I would add is, whatever the intentions were at the time, and when the name was given, it's the word is no longer acceptable, basically. I think there's a belief that it actually originally was named that to honor possibly the original native woman who lived in the area, so it was not necessarily, it wasn't intended as a racist term, but it has, times have changed. That was a long time ago. So, and this would basically say that we're going to change the name and then send it to Public Works Committee to determine what the new name would be.
Any questions for Doug? Okay, well then this will come back next time. Or did you want to
Is there any reason
Can we
just
vote
vote
them
them on time?
vote on it tonight?
I'll move to suspend the rules and take it out of order.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. I'll move approval.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Mary, yeah.
Nancy?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I completely concur. I know it's something that we've talked about, Alder Kerr has talked about for a while, and it's overdue. So let's get it done.
Okay. Anyone else? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
So it was slightly less controversial than it was the first time it came up, like 20 years ago.
Times have changed.
Yes.
Okay, we are moving back up to unfinished business. Item 1A, consideration of ordinance 2-23-764, rezoning 5105 Monona Drive from Retail Business District, RB, to Community Design District, CDD, for the construction of a multifamily development, and this is put forth by the Plan Commission. Is there a motion to approve this?
Motion approved.
Second.
Mr. Plowman?
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for your time this evening. This request is put forward by Walter Wayne Development Corporation seeking approval for the rezoning and map amendments for the purpose of constructing a multifamily building on the property at 5105 Monona Drive. Current zoning of retail business only allows for ancillary residential and would not be appropriate for the proposed project that is being put forward. The Planning Commission, having discussed this at a couple of their meetings in late 2022, recommended the Community Design District CDD designation as the preferred option that gives flexibility for future uses and possible commercial space at the ground floor. The 2016 comp plan shows the parcel is vacant in the current land use map and commercial in the future land use map. The housing section of the plan includes objective to encourage balanced development of a variety of housing types, with an additional objective in the land use section to encourage infill developments on vacant parcels. The Planning Commission made the following recommendation to the City Council for recommendation for approval at their January 23rd meeting with a unanimous vote in favor. And I know that one of the representatives for the project is in person at the library tonight, and we also have Mark Ott, who is with JLA Architects as well.
Questions, anyone? Doug?
Yeah, what's the timeline for the project? Yeah.
I can let the applicant answer that maybe.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Great.
He's going up to the mic.
Great.
Hi, Randy Christensen with Walter Wayne Development. Timeline, Alderwood, it would be, we'd like to start sometime this summer if possible. It's about a 12-month build, so that's kind of what we're thinking.
Okay.
But I just like to make a couple of, as Doug Plowman had pointed out, we have spent a little bit of time with actually some of the alders here on the council, as well as some of the plan commissioners to get to this point. We've gotten some great feedback from everybody, Alder Holmquist and Alder Moore, along with Plan Commissioner Homburg, and Mr. Plowman had set those particular meetings up so that we could better understand what some of the needs are for the city of Monona. And we feel we've carved a nice project out of this that we're excited to build. We're excited to bring some housing stock to the Monona area, and we feel we've actually the parking requirement was something that we were able to understand and work with. And so we just feel we got a really, really great project for the drive, as you guys, as the Mononans call it. So we look forward to it. So any questions that I can help answer, I'd be more than happy to help out. Or part of our team is JLA, Mark Ott. Veer Brecker is our civil engineer. We have not quite pinned down a contractor, but we're getting close. And of course, Walter Wayne is here representing the property owner, Mr. Robert Proctor, who lives in the city of Monona. So we're certainly excited to do this particular project. So any questions that I can answer, I'm more than happy to help.
Questions, anyone? I guess not. Thank you very much. Given there are no questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving on
Thank you.
to our final item under unfinished business, item 1B, consideration of ordinance 2-23-765, creating chapter 367 of the Code of Ordinances regulating short-term rental properties, put forth by me. Is there a motion to approve this?
Motion to approve.
So everybody get the revised one? Ordinance that was sent out.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Okay. Yes, everyone got the revised version with Bill's edits. It was sent out late last week. Bill, did you want to address
Sure,
the
thanks,
edits?
Mayor. So there are, in your red line in your packet with the comments, the language changes are just to accommodate the three proposals raised at the last conference, last council meeting. The first one was Alder Holmquist had proposed not requiring any license if you're going to only rent it out for 5 or fewer days in any calendar year. So the first two red lines, subsection 1 and subsection 3, would implement that proposal if the council pursued it. The second one is on page 2. Alder Thomas had proposed that if the short-term rental is not the primary residence, the minimum rental period would be 29 days. So basically any corporate entities, the minimum they could rent it for would be a 29-day period of time. And then lastly, Alder Rademacher had proposed the idea that in any 7-day period, the short-term rental could only be rented to one person or group, a discrete group or person, to avoid sort of during the 7-day period they can rent to 2 or 3 separate groups or people. That would be accommodated in the second change on page 2. And those were the only changes made since the last meeting. I think Patrick had.
Okay, Patrick, did you have?
I just had one question as far as procedure. If we were to approve this, I mean, obviously we can revisit it at some point in the future if we need to make modifications to it, correct?
Correct.
Yes. So, okay.
Doug?
Yeah, I guess I feel like the change to that where if it's not the operator's primary residence, it can't be rented for any period less than 29 days is just too draconian. To me, I think the other changes should accomplish most of what we're looking for. It'll discourage it without basically prohibiting it effectively.
Anyone else? Patrick, and then Nancy?
I would agree with Doug on that.
Alder Moore?
Yeah, I'm wondering if you can remind me, is there a 5 days or less provision in the Madison? That you don't need a license if it's 5 days?
I do not believe so. I think they require a license.
Even if it's a single day?
Yep. If it's rented for compensation.
And what would the language be here?
This would be on the first page. Subsection 1 says it shall be unlawful for any person to operate a short-term rental in the city of Monona for 6 or more days in any calendar year without a permit. And then in the application, subsection 3, it had the same language.
Bill, was there any language removed or only language added?
Only language added.
Okay.
Mark, did you have a?
I just got a question more for Bill. So if they approved this tonight, we would set the next meeting, we'd set the fees for this? I'm just wondering what our next step would be.
Correct.
To go from here.
Yep, because right now, the fee schedule does not have the application fee amount or the forfeiture amount for failing to get the license. So the next meeting, then the council would want to pass an ordinance amending the forfeiture and fee schedule.
I have a question about number 7, sub F. If the short-term rental is operated for stays of more than 6, but fewer than 29 consecutive days, the property may be operated for no more than 180 days in any consecutive 365-day period, blah, blah, blah. So is all of this to say that we are trying to establish a rental season? Is that the point to this? Like, you're saying, or are we saying, the 180 allowable days must run consecutively, and the operator must give the city administrator notice of the first rental of any period. So we're sort of asking the operator to declare a rental season this half of the year or that half of the year. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, they could start their 180-day clock any way, any time they want. So you're creating sort of a rest period for the neighborhood. Once they start it, they can use it for 180 days, but then the second 180 days, there can't be any short-term rental, which is one way communities are doing it. The other way communities are doing it is sort of as you suggest, where they're setting a season. They will say the 180-day period commences May 1 and expires October 1. And the municipality establishes the 180-day season. Here, you're not setting the season, but you're setting the period of time, the clock.
But, correct. But since those 180 days must be consecutive, if I decide that tomorrow starts the 180 days, after 180 days go by, consecutive days, I can no longer rent.
That's correct.
For this calendar year. So I am starting my own season at any time I want, but I'm defining which 180 days of the calendar are mine to rent.
Yep, absolutely. The only reason I sort of pushed back on season is because if there was an STR next to yours, theirs
Sure,
may be totally
sure.
different.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
there won't be a designated season.
I get what
because
you're
everybody's
saying.
season
I
is
get what
different.
you're
Yep.
saying. Yeah, yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to make that clear because I'm not sure that, is that what we want? I don't know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Brian and then Nancy.
I read this differently, where the consecutive is listed, where it's talking about the consecutive 365 days. That you can rent up to 180 in any 365-day period, which is a rolling period.
Hold on, let me read it.
Brian, it's the last sentence that I'm getting my interpretation
What
from.
item are we on? Maybe that would be
We're on
helpful.
number
7F.
7, F as in Frank.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, Alder Holmquist, you are right up until that last sentence. Then it says the 180-day allowable days in any 365-day period must run consecutively, and the STR has to let us know when it starts. So if you wanted to, if you deleted that last sentence, then it would be as you say. You know, you could pick and choose your 180 days any way you want.
Which I think Teresa's saying is like, I don't think,
Yeah.
I don't think our intention is to limit, there's only 180 days, and then you need 180 days where you can't do anything. I think what we're saying is, we don't want it rented 365 days.
Right.
If that's the intent, then we would just delete that
Last
last sentence in subsection F.
Alder Moore?
Do we, as this council knows, since I started, one of the things that I'm always nervous about is passing ordinances that we can't enforce, or that are difficult to enforce. And I'm just curious if we, given the room tax we're currently receiving, if we have any idea how many residences this applies to right now?
I do not. I just get how many number of nights was rented when they send me the form, but not how many residents.
So when you are receiving room tax, you're not getting addresses or anything to be able to say, oh, there's 50 houses that are doing this in Monona right now?
Correct. So Airbnb or Expedia will send just a form, our form that we're required to fill out, and they just send what the total amount of sales times 8%, and then what our amount is. And they say total number of nights rented. They'll have on that form too, but we don't have how many different houses or so.
Because, I mean, certainly I know that the fees that we're suggesting here are comparable to the surrounding communities, including Madison, except for the 1,000. But that's around violations. But I am concerned because it seems to me that I can just tell you that alders that have seen, and I know, the mayor and the city attorney has as well, have seen the applications and the materials and the ordinances and everything else from Madison, and I understand that Madison is a whole heck of a lot different than Monona, but, it's taking full-time, multiple staff, full-time, to stay on top of the whole application and inspection, and I just know that we're challenged to stay on top of inspections of our current ordinances. So I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, I'm just saying, because we definitely need to do it, but I am just expressing my concern that if it's too complex, that it's going to be, that'll be really very, very difficult to administer.
Do you have a specific suggestion to make it less complex, or?
I guess it kind of goes back to what, I guess I was thinking, like maybe 5 days or less is too few. Like if it's only 5 days, if it's anything over 5 days, you have to go through this whole process.
5 days per year, right?
Right, 5 days per year. Yeah. I mean, I can just tell you, I have friends that, rent out their house on home football weekends every year just to earn some extra cash.
So do you think we should drop the 5-day thing, or what is
I'm thinking maybe it should be a little bit wider. Like instead of 5 days, it could be 10 or 12 days or something like that, because that would at least free up some kind of application, inspection, health, everything that we're talking about in terms of managing this program. At least it would, it just seems like maybe something like a couple of weeks, or something shy of a couple of weeks might make more sense, because then we wouldn't be chasing after and having to, because the amount of administrative support to do a 5-day application is not a whole lot different than doing, if you're trying to do it on, a half-year basis. So I'm just thinking maybe that would be one way
Is
Provi-
5 or
provides
6
a-
days pretty standard, Bill, do you know? With other
Um,
communities, I have no idea. I don't.
Yeah, the ones I've seen and drafted, we haven't had any exception. If you rent it for one day, for compensation, the ordinance would apply. So the 5 days is, I would say somewhat novel, not unheard of. I mean, I have seen them with some thresholds, but I think that's not the common trend. Madison does not have a threshold, as we said.
I do think, as far as the implication of who's going to do that, I think that is going to be the thing. We have to sit down with the clerk, the planner, and myself, and probably lead into how we're going to do this, because it is going to be a big, in code enforcement, a big undertaking. And so we're going to have to come with the best way of doing this.
And the first thing we're going to have to do is figure out where they are.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of
So
stuff
we know,
that's...
I mean, we have some idea, but I'm sure we don't know all of them.
Or, I'm sorry.
Teresa?
Or is it like any violation of any law? If it's not reported, doesn't happen, right? I mean, if you, do you know what I'm saying? It's like if you're speeding and no officer sees you, you don't get a ticket. You've still broken the law, but there's no penalty. So if you operate, a short-term rental and you're not complying with these rules, but your neighbors don't care and never say anything about it, are we proposing that we're going to be looking for the folks, or are we just going to wait until the problem comes to us?
I think we want to make sure they're
I think it's-
registered at
Because
least,
we're
right?
getting the room tax, so it's not like speeding because, it would be like having a radar gun on the car, so you could still give them a ticket even though there wasn't an office sitting there. I mean,
Okay.
effectively, the room tax is can be a radar gun.
So substitute my story for
Right.
the overhead cameras on the highway that catch
Right.
it. I get that. But if nothing is caught, that's all I'm saying. But we do have a way of catching it. So I just didn't know if you were proposing that we go out looking for.
Well, I guess I assume that's what this ordinance is to start, because they're going to file with the clerk, I mean, some type of, I mean, I guess that's the thing, we have to sit down and kind of figure out how we're going to implement this, I mean.
Not to speak for Mark or the administration, but I think the reality right now is you just do not have the staffing level
Right.
to go out and affirmatively seek out violations. I think you'd almost have to, like many of our property maintenance violations or
Right.
zoning violations, it's a complaint-driven.
Correct.
And if somebody complains, we'll certainly go out and investigate.
That's what I'm saying.
But
Right.
I don't think you have the manpower to go out
Not right now, we do not.
No.
But we'll have to figure out how we're going to do it, though. I mean,
We at
it's
least have to figure out a process for making sure they filled out the form.
Right, and all that stuff.
Had the inspection or whatever. And Patrick, did you have something?
I think my question was answered. No.
I had a question.
Doug?
So just want to make sure I understood this right. When we get the room tax receipts for Airbnbs or VRBOs in Monona, short-term rentals, they just send us the money with how many nights, what the total is? They don't have to tell us where the rooms are?
No, it's not, I mean, that's, our current form was set up like that. I guess that was before Airbnbs and stuff like that, so I don't know if maybe we have to look at the form.
Could we
but-
require that?
We could. Many communities have tried the industry, VRBO and Airbnb. They view this as they're making voluntary good faith payments to the communities, and that they're not compelled to do anything more than that. Most communities have decided to just accept it as opposed to going into court and litigating with them. But I think if you pass an ordinance like this and you wanted to, you would have the legal framework to take them to court and compel them to divulge that. It would just mean litigation.
Nancy?
So, a couple of things come to mind. First of all, as long as you all are sitting down and trying to figure out how much it would cost to administer this, one of the things that I think would be advantageous to find out is, and I think I've brought this up previously, Madison has a program that they spend $10,000 a year on, that pings every time an address is listed on one of these sites. And we're not talking about 1 or 2 sites. It's like 15 to 20 sites and growing. There's, every time I turn around, there's a new Airbnb out there. And so, they have a map, and it pings. My understanding is Dane County was talking about investing in this similar webware program for all the other communities except for Madison, precisely because $10,000 a year for that would be cost prohibitive, right?
Right.
So we might want to find out where the county is,
Yeah.
because that would certainly help. It would, I think, in terms of knowing where the properties are. We wouldn't need to litigate with Airbnb or whoever to find out where the properties are, because this pings every time the property shows up on whatever, the sites are. And I guess I just feel, my second thing relates to conceivably not enforcing it, to go to Teresa's point. I understand that we might not have the capacity to enforce it, and yet I'm wondering if that puts us in greater risk. In that, if we say that we have an application process and an inspection process, and we aren't following through on that, and something happens in one of these residences. I mean, I'm kind of reminded in my, university administrator days when the lawyers told us to take the fact that this university had a non-drinking policy, off the books. They didn't want us saying that students at the university couldn't drink, because that implied that we were going to enforce it. And so the lawyers literally said, don't put it on the books, because unless you're prepared to enforce students not drinking alcohol, it opens you up for more litigation. And the same thing is true, I guess I'm saying here, if we go ahead and we do an application and we do an inspection procedure and we do all this stuff, we say we do it and we're going to follow up on it, and then we don't have the ability to follow up on it, doesn't that not open up us for liability if something happens at one of these facilities that either didn't get inspected or didn't get, we didn't follow up on in any way, and does that not put us at risk?
Bill, what are your thoughts?
You're absolutely right in the sense that if you're not obligated to do something, the safer play is to just not do anything, because once you voluntarily do something and you fail to implement it, you can be alleged to be negligent in failing to implement your problem. And colleges face that often in business entities. It's a slight difference with a municipality. We have quasi-judicial immunity. So when you're passing ordinances like this, there's always discretion as to enforcement based on the resources of the community, the threat to the public, that sort of thing. So I believe you would be immune. I'm fairly certain of that. There are many laws that they're on the books. We enforce them to the extent our manpower allows us to, but it's certainly not universal enforcement. I'm pretty comfortable we would be immune from any such claim. That said, though, that wouldn't stop any plaintiff from making the allegation, and we would at least have to answer and defend it until we got dismissed. So I think the point's well taken that, yes, certainly people will accuse you of not enforcing your law. I think at the end you're immune, but you would never.
Sorry, I was just going to, as a follow-up to that, selective enforcement. If for some reason, we weren't enforcing it, let's say, some people didn't do an application and they had an Airbnb running and we didn't enforce it, or we found out about one and we were able to enforce it, we charged them $500 or $1,000 because they were in violation, and then somebody else we didn't enforce, could the person that got charged $1,000 file against us because they were charged and there's 6 other people in the neighborhood that weren't?
Yeah, they could. Legally, we would only be subject to responsibility if we discriminated against a person that was of a protected class, or if we violated equal protection rights in some way. If we just decided that we were going to only cite people that were born in September or something like that. Absent those 2 things, though, we very commonly, police officers pull over some people, not other people, and the person pulled over does not have standing to assert, well, the other 4 people were not pulled over. So again, that's one of those where it may appear unfair to the person that's cited, but legally it's not a problem.
Brian?
With the issue of knowing addresses, are we able to add anything to the ordinance that would require any funds that are collected as part of a short-term rental, that the associated nights for payment for the taxes be accompanied by a physical address?
I'm not sure I'm following you. So we would know the physical address of the STR.
And to say that any funds that are collected through our room rental, the expectation is for every night of room rental tax be accompanied by which physical address?
I think that's already in our room tax ordinance. They're required to submit a return to us annually with each location and the amount of rental, right? That's how they calculate the room tax.
Didn't
No, they
Mark
don't.
just say they don't?
They don't.
No, not VRBOs, but once you pass this ordinance, you require them to license it. They're required to pay the room tax.
And then at the end of the year, we'll get a yearly statement that lists out the physical address with the number of nights?
Correct, because we don't have to accept VRBO's statement. We can go directly to the licensee, because the licensee is responsible for complying with our room tax ordinance.
How do we know that they're complying?
Well, if we wanted to be assertive in enforcing this, each licensee, we could audit at the end of each year, how they're required to keep records, a ledger of all their rentals, and the room tax ordinance requires that they account for that. So we could, it would be an auditing expense, a manpower expense, but we certainly would have the legal framework to do that if that was what the city wanted to do.
And we would be relying on self-reported numbers.
We pretty much do that with hotels too, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're right. Absent somebody being able, an independent party documenting each day it was rented, you're right. We're relying on the licensee to report that.
Any other?
The other parts I was going to add is I know Doug talked about eliminating the 29-day. I would agree with the 29-day elimination piece, to leave it as, it doesn't matter if it's owner occupied or not. If it's not the more than one rental per a 7 rolling day, that's the key issue. And then the 180 days any time in the 365. And then I think to Nancy's point of the 5 days seems maybe too low. I was thinking I would be comfortable starting with a 14-day window as a window out there. And the way I came up with that number is a few weekends throughout the year of a 2-night rental. This is where I came up with that off-the-cuff number. Of something that is not every weekend, but the idea of like
I do think that
some football games.
the 180 days whenever would be harder to enforce if we're going to try to enforce it, because if you start on one day and you have to end on 180 days later, then obviously you know, your neighbors would know if they're renting it outside that period, whereas if it's any of 180 days,
You don't, right.
it'd be very easy to have 220
Right,
days, and
right.
nobody's going to know.
That's what I was thinking. It would be very easy for a neighbor to know whether the Airbnb next door is violating the rules.
I think it's just,
Because
I'm not
there's
sure
this-
we're interested in locking people into 180 days, that, no, you only get these 180 days, and too bad, so
Yeah.
sad for the St. Patrick's Run.
And in the way Bill put it, it kind of gives the neighborhood a rest. You know, like half of the year,
But
no
it isn't.
rentals. The other half
We
of the
both
year.
have a rental, and I pick these 180,
Oh,
and
right,
you pick a different
right.
180, there's no
Right.
rest.
Right.
I mean, the idea is we want to limit,
And
so
and you
it's
could
not
own both of them.
every night.
Yeah.
Doug?
But what would the 180 days be here? I mean, in a resort area, you could pretty well define the season. The season
It's
here, I mean, I think
self-defined. It's
Football season?
anybody defined.
it's football, it's also summer, you know, it's
Yeah.
kind of.
I mean, I could just see somebody, I mean, let's just, I mean, I have zero interest in being an Airbnb property, but as somebody who obviously travels in the summer for work, you know, or let's just take somebody at the university, I'll take myself out of it. Take somebody at the university, when the university is not in session, they might be gone for the summer and they might want to rent it during the summer, and that's 90 days. Well, the university's not in session in January, too. So maybe they go skiing in January because they're not working in January either. I mean, I know plenty of people at UW that's the case. They go off skiing in January, so they couldn't rent it in January because their 180 days started sometime in the summer. I mean, that was, you know, I mean, I can see there's lots of scenarios where it wouldn't necessarily, if it wasn't consecutive, where it wouldn't, you know, that it wouldn't necessarily, it wouldn't be a problem.
I'm going to make a motion for one of the amendments, that we take out 7H, which is the requirement of, it says STR is not, if it's not the operator's primary residence, it may not be rented for any period less than 29 consecutive days. So I'd move to remove that language.
Is there a second?
Second, is there discussion?
Any discussion of that? Any
Does
further
anyone,
discussion?
can someone translate? What is the problem that this is intending to solve?
Well, because right now, with this language, you would,
Because I agree. I read it and I'm like, I don't understand. What are we getting at here?
if it's not the operator's primary residence,
Right.
then it it can't be rented for any period less than 29 consecutive days. So effectively, they'd have to do a minimum of month-to-month
Yeah.
tenancy. then.
Or another way to look at it is that you cannot turn it over more than one time per 29 days.
Right.
That's another way to look at it.
This was
right?
Alder
This
Thomas's.
says you have to do it, you
Yeah.
have to rent it for.
Well, but I
at
could
least
say,
29
I could
consecutive
say,
days.
you're staying 29 days and really you stay 2 weeks, but I have to treat it as though you're there 29 days. I cannot rent it to another person until 29 days is over. So what this also does is it prevents frequent turnover of that property.
And I think that was probably the purpose.
Maybe, yeah, I wasn't sure if
No,
that
I
was-
think it was to try to exclude non-individual ownership.
Yeah.
That was,
Yeah.
so.
Any further discussion about
He
it?
he needs a second.
Brian.
Oh, Brian.
Yeah, Brian second. Anyone else have anything to add? We have a motion and a second. Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Now we're back to the original.
I have a, back to the document, so again, number 7, sub H, okay, so we just got rid of that. And then sub J, 1, or it might be K. It was indented a bit on the document. The point here is that the STR may not be rented to multiple unassociated parties at the same time. So let's say you have 2 available rooms. You cannot rent each of them to a different group. These groups do not know one another. These 2 people don't know one another. That's truly a hotel model. I think that that's what that is trying to get at. The following point was the one that I asked be added, that the short-term rental may not be rented to more than one person or group in any 7 consecutive day periods, is another way to say that. Actually, let me rewind. I wanted to go back to the previous point. I just saw a note that I left myself. What is the definition of an unassociated party? If Epic wants to put up a bunch of employees and they want, Susan from HR and Joe from purchasing to, I mean, if they're both in the same house, but they don't know each other, and Epic is, foot in the bill,
It's defined up in 2A.
Okay.
Multiple associated parties, 2 or more individuals who separately book accommodations at the same STR on any shared date.
Yes, that's right. Okay.
So one person could book for like 3 people who aren't related, and that's okay?
It would be the same group, yeah.
Yeah, it'd be the same group. I guess it's the same group. Yeah, it's fine. So, okay, enough of that. So my next question then was the point that I asked to be added, 7L, I believe it is. The short-term rental may not be rented to more than one person or group in any 7 consecutive day period. And again here, the point is to limit turnover. You can't just have this revolving door business model. I'm wondering, if the phrase multiple associated parties, if that's a phrase that sort of has already been defined and it has some legal meaning, would it be easier to understand if we rephrased this particular line so that it says the short-term rental may not be rented to multiple unassociated parties within a 7-day period? Does that read in a way that's clearer and builds on prior understanding?
No. But because multiple unassociated parties is defined as booking it on any shared date.
Mm-hmm.
So that wouldn't really be the same as what we're doing with the 7-day.
And the way you have it listed, I think is fine.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
No turnover in
Okay.
7 days.
Yeah.
Then let's keep it.
Anyone else? Nancy?
I'm confused as to the 5-day thing that Brian and I just talked about. I'm trying to find it in
Wasn't it, are you talking about Brian's request to add the 6-day?
to bring it up to 2 weeks. I think Brian was
14.
thinking about making, right?
I just haven't got to the amendment yet.
Okay.
You ready for it?
Yeah, I was going to make the amendment if you were.
Oh, go for it.
But I can't find it in the
I
document.
think it
It's
was
too dense.
the very first point, right?
Yeah.
With the
Section
red
3.
line for 6 or more days in a connected.
The first 2 red lines,
Yeah.
subsections 1 and 3.
Yeah,
1 and 3.
Same
yeah.
thing. It must be. Okay. Go
Because
ahead.
you're in the
Ethan.
web, you're not on the PDF version. All right. So I will make a motion that we amend section 1 to move from 6 days to 14 days, as well as in section 3.
Can I just, the way it's worded, if you say 14 or greater, then they have to be 13. You would exclude, if they do
15
2
or
weeks.
greater.
Okay. Yep.
Second.
Are we discussing now?
Yeah.
Brian, why are you changing it? I mean, 6 is
So I
good.
think to Nancy's point, like if you're renting for 2 3 nights, that really limits you to maybe 2 opportunities throughout the year without having to go through this process. And that seems to be on the lower end. And I was trying to come up with a number that if we were to do a small handful on a 2-night rental, what would that be?
So these
one
people
thought.
wouldn't be registered at all?
Correct.
We wouldn't know, so how would we know if they had done more than 7 and then 14 days?
It'd be complaint driven.
Right.
How do we collect room taxes if they're not registered? Just
They would still submit room
submit
tax.
it, but they're doing it, but we don't know that they're
Kind of like they're
operating.
doing it now.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
So you get 14 days, doesn't have to be consecutive, any 14 days in the year, you can have guests, you don't have to fill out any paperwork, no registration, no nothing.
Right.
Okay.
You'd still be subject to the room tax ordinance.
Yes.
We'd still receive the revenue.
Okay.
If they knew that. And if they just start renting, we don't know, it's...
Well, that would be their problem
Yeah.
later. I mean, the stuff is probably only going to get uncovered if there is some kind of problem,
Yeah.
significant enough to
Can
spend
I-
resources to investigate.
I have a question. This amendment that Alder Holmquist is proposing, it really just removes the requirement to register, but it doesn't remove any of the other. I mean, these folks are still expected to abide by all the other rules that we've
No.
discussed today.
No, they would be exempt from the entire
From-
section.
So they could have multiple unassociated parties, big loud parties for 14 days,
And then someone complains, the police come.
but but the police can't enforce anything because they're exempt from it.
Well, the police can enforce noise ordinances.
Yeah,
noise
Right,
complaints,
right, I mean,
you
but
know, trespassing.
I'm proposing the 14 as a starting place. I just don't think we have enough experience right now. We have nothing. And moving to have something, I think, is a good idea. And I think there's some of us that are wrestling with the idea of there are people that maybe live alone and have a room that they like to rent out every once in a while as additional income. And I don't think it's necessarily the same level of burdensome as some other places. And the 14 might be the wrong number, and we might be back here in 3 months saying 14 is the wrong number. It should be 8.
Patrick?
You're talking about like a very different scenario too, you know, obviously with somebody who's living in their home and just that exact scenario versus someone who's doing this as an enterprise.
business,
You know, it's
right.
their business and that's how they're making their money and therefore it should be regulated. And we're trying to, I think, and, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, you're attempting to, you know, recognize private property rights to some degree too. In fact, letting people do this in their own home is a part-time endeavor, you know.
Yeah, again, there's, you know, I mean, I have brought up the people that I know rent their place on football weekends, but the same people, I can remember them renting it out over Bratfest, and I can remember them renting it out when CrossFit was in town too. I mean, basically big, big Banison occurrences where they can go out of town and make some extra bucks.
Do you know, do they pay the room tax fee?
I assume so.
That's what we're expecting.
The answer is yes right now.
No,
meaning
I mean,
if they're
I'm
going through
assuming so, because
Airbnb.
they're listed on Airbnb. I mean, they're listed on Airbnb. So assuming Airbnb is, and I think there's a fair number of people in Monona that do that.
But are you saying they're not registered? Well, if they're listed on Airbnb, then are they registered through like the city of Of course, city of Madison doesn't allow.
These are people in Monona.
They're not registered to anybody.
Oh, well, people in
doing it.
Monona don't, obviously they don't have to register right now, so.
Right,
yeah.
but I'm saying, do we really want, again, going back to the whole enforcement issue, if somebody's just doing it for a few, extra nights, a few nights a year to, put a little extra cash in their pocket, do we really want to be spending all of our time trying to enforce it or regulate it? I don't think that is disturbing to a neighborhood if somebody's doing it that little.
Patrick?
Well, I remember when we first started talking about this, it seemed like our stated purpose of doing this was a few things. Public safety, right? We wanted to make sure that, it wasn't burdensome in neighborhoods and if people weren't running legitimate hotels. We wanted to make sure that, the quality of life issues for people in their neighborhoods. And we wanted to make sure that we weren't taking homes off of the market that someone could purchase as a single-family home and live in it instead of using this as a business. And I think that this ordinance, as it's written right now, prevents all those things from happening, or at least it's like Brian mentioned and Nancy mentioned, it's a great starting point. It's better than what we have now, and we could always revisit it at some point in the future if we need to modify it. So I think that it addresses those three things pretty well.
Call the question.
Anyone else?
Is this on the amendment, right?
Yeah.
Second amendment.
For 14 days.
Wait, we're talking about the Second Amendment now?
Do we have a motion?
Yes, this motion was for
There's a
the
motion
15
by
or more.
Brian, seconded by Doug, to change the 6 days to 15 days.
To 15 days. Any other points to be made about that? Okay, then all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
And then I have one last one.
Okay.
A motion to delete the last sentence in 7F, I believe, unless the lettering has changed.
Second?
Oh, about the 180 allowable days running consecutively?
Yep. So this would make it be, you can rent it up to 180 days, and you don't need to dedicate a set window. It would just be 180, any 180 days.
And did someone second that? Nancy seconded?
Nancy.
Okay. Any further discussion on that?
I have a question.
Teresa?
Are we saying that we're basically just eliminating the idea of consecutive 180 days? Okay. Still, it's 180 days, though. All right.
Which I should, God knows I'm not a math expert, but keep in mind you've got other, you get one person within 7 days, depending on if it's your primary residence, you've got, the math may get wonky, but I'm viewing this as, no matter how the math works out, the maximum somebody can do would be 180 days.
Exactly.
It could be less than that.
Right, exactly.
And these are owner-occupied homes for the most part, right?
For the most part, but it would apply to any, his language.
Yeah.
So are we striking the residence has to be a primary residence altogether?
No.
Okay.
It says, there are some provisions that are more draconian if it's not their primary residence.
But are you saying that if it's any 180 days, that applies to houses that are bought to be VRBOs? People are not living in as their primary residence?
Correct.
But remember, those houses cannot turn over more than one time every 7 days.
Yep, exactly. There's other provisions.
So you're kind of, you're killing the business model right there.
Yeah, nobody's going to want to do it if they can't do it all year.
Right.
Right, yeah, so that...
that alone is kind of the magic part of it all.
And is that what we want to be doing?
Yeah, because the safety, you're not going to have a different car in the driveway next to you all the time. It's unsafe.
Well, and the whole thing is that, if we have all these houses that are effectively becoming hotels, then it drives up the housing costs and everything we are trying to do on affordable housing and everything else gets...
But I just want to be clear that what we're saying is that nobody could rent for more than 180 days a year.
Short-term
Correct.
rentals.
For short-term rental.
Correct.
Whether or not it's their primary residence or they're just buying it
Correct.
for extra income, or whatever.
And on top of that, you can't turn it over more than one time a week, so, yeah.
Correct, has to be more than 15, though, right? Otherwise it doesn't apply.
Right, that's true.
So I have a question in relation to that. So how does this interface with just our regular ordinances or if you will, for rentals.
Like a
For longer
landlord-
term
like a
rentals.
landlord
I mean, it seems
tenant?
to me if we're going to 180 days, that's a half a year, then we're getting close to what is a long-term rental, and so,
We're not saying 180 consecutive days of the same person, though, are we, for the most part?
But a month-to-month tenancy is very different than short-term rental. I mean, the definitions, the legal definitions are very different, so they shouldn't affect each other. Bill, right? I mean.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is, by definition and state law, this only regulates stays of less than 30 days at a time. Landlord-tenant law applies for 30 days or greater periods.
thank you. Just wanted to make sure. I was like,
So I think you're on Amendment 3.
So we're on Amendment 3, which is the last
striking the sentence.
7F.
seven
sentence.
items. Anything else? So that we do have a motion and a second on that. Brian?
Yeah, just for informational, if I figured out the 7-day rotation, on average, if you rotated every 7 days, you would be renting it for a 3.5 night stay every rotation. But you would never, you would be shy of the 180. So unless you were doing solid chunks, you would likely be less.
Good info.
Why the 3.5 nights stay?
If you were trying to rent every 7 consecutive day period, you would either have to do full week chunks,
Right.
and then you would run
Which-
out quickly.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to spread it throughout the whole entire year, you would
Got
be
it.
at about a 3.5 night stay
Right.
every week.
Every week. Yeah.
So essentially, you could rent it out every weekend
Yeah. Yeah.
and fit it.
But you wouldn't be renting it out every day to a different person.
Correct.
As is happening.
It'd be like the same person that comes Thursday night and leaves Sunday.
Yeah.
Anything else on this one? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Now we are back to the original motion, correct?
Yep.
As amended. Is there any further discussion on that?
Just a
Patrick?
comment. I think everyone did a really good job crafting this, and I think everybody should be proud about this first draft here that we're going to implement. I think it's great.
Proof will be in the pudding.
That's right.
Complicated stuff. Okay, if there isn't anything else, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, and thank you, Bill. This has been kind of a...
Mayor, can we request that you do come back to us? I mean, obviously, this is, first, well, one thing is, as was pointed out earlier by Alder Rademacher, there's no reason for us to reinvent the wheel. Like, there's great FAQs, for instance, that Madison already has on their website that the average person can read as opposed to the average person.
Yeah.
So as we develop applications and all that kind of stuff, I would encourage us not to reinvent the wheel because there's plenty out there of other communities that have already done this that can be easily adapted for us. And second, you mentioned that you wanted to sit down with the staff and actually figure out how much it was going to cost. And I would just like to, I'm wondering if we could request that information come back to be shared with this body whenever that is.
Yeah, I was just
whenever
going
that
to
is
sit
done.
down and figure out what our strategy is and how we're going to do this.
Yeah. Yeah, as a
And could
follow-up.
we use some of the tax funding to pay for that?
Well, that'd be one of the things we'll probably look
Yeah.
at.
Aldermore,
That would be nice.
I believe Aldermore shared the links to the Madison information with Mark and others. Is that correct?
Yeah, he's
Yeah, I
already
think we
given
had
us
Okay,
that
yeah,
earlier.
Yeah.
wonderful.
But the application and all the forms and the drawings and everything else are pages and pages and pages long, and you may not have seen the FAQs at the end. because
Yeah, the
it's like
FAQs
20
are
pages.
brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, moving on then to reports of committees, commissions, et cetera. Are there any updates or discussion on diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts? Any updates or discussion on sustainability efforts?
Mayor, may I backtrack a moment, or have I lost my chance for the DEI?
Sure.
Comment?
Sure.
Something was brought up in the last DEI meeting that I think is something that I have allowed to soak into my head, and it's very meaningful. And we were talking about affordable housing, and someone in the room said, "I want to challenge you to see that there are plenty of people who can afford to live here. They simply choose not to," right? So as we move forward with DEI discussions, I know that I'm going to be having that in the front of my thoughts, and to try and find ways to make Monona a welcoming community beyond just the affordability of housing. So I thought that was an interesting conversation.
Anyone else? Then we will move on to committee reports. Alder Nakula.
Not a committee report per se, but I just wanted to take a moment and thank Leah and Mark for navigating the banking issue that we had earlier this week, and putting a huge amount of effort into trying to make sure that everybody got paid on time, which included cutting checks and a day early, and making sure that we would address issues if people had NSF fees or anything else. Really, I know it was a lot of work and it was a lot of stressful. It was very stressful based on some external pressure, and I just want to say, thank you guys very much for taking care of our employees and taking care of that situation.
Thank you.
Alder Holmquist.
No report.
Alder Moore.
The new transit survey is out and up on the website and city's website, and postcards. I received my postcard today in my mail, which is faster than it was pretty impressive. I mean, Wells is always so impressive. But more impressive, I also want to thank the city staff once again, because did an amazing. Mark and Leah and Diane and Jensen, who works at Park and Rec, who helped put did put the survey up, and of course the Transit Commission themselves. And I'm going to encourage everyone in the community to not only take the survey, but to please read the FAQs and spend some time with the other information before taking the survey, because part of the reason when I walked in tonight that I was a wee bit late, or I thought I was a wee bit late, was that I was listening to a resident who had all kinds of ideas of how it was going to operate that had nothing to do with the reality. So
I'm shocked.
Yeah. So I'm just really going to encourage everybody to take the survey, and it's surveymonkey.com/r/Monona Bus Transit. Again, take the survey, and we look forward to pawing through the data once. We have not set a deadline for the survey at this juncture, because we really didn't know how long it was going to take to get the postcards out and all of that. But I would expect that it's probably going to be mid-March or so. So it'll be up for a while, but please take the survey. And again, thanks to everybody, and especially to the city staff and Transit Commission.
And people can access it by going to mymonona.com, right? It's right
Yes.
on the carousel on the front
Yes.
page, too.
Right on the front page, yep.
Alder Wood.
No report.
Alder Rademacher.
Something interesting that came out of community media is that Monona will soon have its own app on your phone, and it's called Monona Go. There was a fun meeting. There were about 30 suggestions for what we might call it, and it was just this lovely little consensus building. Everybody was polite and it went really well. And then we all just love the idea of Monona Go. So it'll be just like going to YouTube and watching all your favorite meetings and basketball and football games and whatnot.
Yeah. Cool. Chief.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to give a thank you to Public Works, who've been working really hard to keep our roads safe. Every time we get a winter storm, I cannot wait until the season's over. And then also just a reminder, I'm sure you do, but just a reminder and request, if you have any questions, please come and contact me. We submit our monthly reports that provides a pretty decent snapshot as to some of the calls for service, some of the, I guess, higher profile calls that your police department goes to. So take particular notice to some of the decisions that are being made out there with respect to chases, when to chase, not to chase. We had a couple this week, police chases in which they've ended safely. We got 3 guns unlawfully in possession of persons. I just was involved with a meeting with other police chiefs in the county and just talking about the number of dangerous firearms that are out there. So something to keep in mind when you're reviewing the monthly reports is looking at some of the dangerous calls that your officers are going to, but they're doing it to keep all of you safe. So, and I say that because I just recently attended the funeral services for the Milwaukee officer who was shot and killed in line of duty responding to a robbery call. And also, I've already apologized to you, Alder. Patrick, sorry, he wants me to call him Patrick. Our ride-along program is up and running. So for those of you who I may have forgotten about when you made that request to me last year, please just shoot me an email. We're starting to get those up and going again. Teresa, did you do yours already?
No, but I remember talking to you about it. Yeah.
So there's another one I missed.
I never got one because I was on public safety during COVID.
Oh, that's
so I might have
COVID
to.
folks that are coming. Yes.
Can we just borrow the car? Can we just do it?
So please do. For the general public, we're easing our way into our ride-along program. So we're going to start with some of our committee members, such as Public Safety Committee, who we're able to get, I think, 1 or 2 done. Some actually a former holder, now those of you who currently sit on council. So, and my apologies, I forgot. We're doing some early spring cleaning. I'm sure that ended up in a shredded pile, so take no offense. But we'll get to you. The officers are very enthusiastic. They're very. I told them, hey, there's no censor. Tell folks what you want, how it is, how it isn't. Whatever you want to share, that's the real deal. You got a real chief, so I expect you to relay any information you can. So, and then I just wanted to make a quick announcement so that you didn't hear it from somebody else. I was recently voted as the vice president for the Dane County Chiefs of Police Association, which is a great honor. Thank you. It comes with a 3-year gig. That means because I'm vice president this year, I'm president next year, and then I'm past president the year after. So I did ask around before taking those who nominated me up on the nomination, and it doesn't seem like this is going to be overwhelming, but it's something that I think is good for Monona. So, and that, any questions?
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you get that 10-gallon hat now?
Did you see me this weekend?
I saw it on Facebook.
So, and that's another thing. Yeah, we're out and about, and the crew. I think they were looking back to see what the reactions were going to be. They were all, kind of jokes, but they were all positive. And so now I actually have a lot more members that are gonna. There's a place up in Beaver Dam. It's like the nearest place to get sized up and get fitted out for a felt hat. And so they're all lined up to do that.
And these are the Calgary hats, right?
They're Stetson or Calgary hats.
Okay, so they're either.
But I do. A southern drawl comes out every time I wear that. But yes.
I heard a rumor that you're doing tactical kilts next. Was that it?
No cowboy boots, maybe.
And then Chief, what was the process for coordinating a ride-along? What?
Send me an email.
Oh, that's it? Okay,
Please.
thank you.
Just to help me remember and Alder Moore, yes, I do remember now in our many conversations.
I'm just thinking we're in Wisconsin and you should be wearing like a Stormy Cromer or something. I'm just saying.
I feel like too much like Fargo.
Yes.
Yeah. We do have the Fargo hats.
Oh, see? Jackson likes it. He's
The
in the
Stormy
window giving a big thumbs up.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Leah, did you have anything to tell us today?
If Aline were here, I think she would like to remind everyone that tomorrow is a primary election. The polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And if you have an absentee ballot that you want to return tomorrow, you can return it in person to City Hall.
Right, not at the polling place.
Not at the polling
So you cannot
place.
accept it there. Correct. Mark?
No report.
I too would like to thank staff for all you did with that banking problem and all the kerfluffle that surrounded it. So, we all appreciate it. And I'm glad that from what we understand, nobody had any problems with bounce checks or anything like that. So I think you did the best you could. And I'd also like to thank the Transit Commission and the staff, and Nancy in particular, who spent many, many, many hours on that survey. And I think it turned out really well, and I hope everybody's promoting it on their social media and whatever. And yeah, if people want to give their input, this is a good way to do it. So we want to hear from people about this.
For how long will it be out?
Probably mid-March.
Mid-March.
Yeah. And we'll be announcing, I assume, well before we're going to take it down. So there's one appointment tonight, Jacek Krzyzewski, to the Board of Review, and I just realized that his application is not in the packet. I didn't think about it. We have been trying to find someone for Board of Review for at least 2 years. This is a second alternate position. But he is a former property appraiser. So, exactly the kind of experience we're looking for. And he works for the state now, but he's still very involved kind of on the side in the real estate world. And so I think he'll be a great addition to that board. So is there a motion to approve the appointments?
Motion to approve. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.